what I hear time and time again from European officials from a whole range of countries is that this is not fundamentally for them about the UK rejoining the European Union or the single market or the customs union or joining the Schengen zone. What they want is a stable partner that they can establish a long-term strategic relationship with that will be predictable, that they can count on.
Now, as we welcome the seventh Prime Minister in a decade, what about the global international community? What do they make of what's going on here? I'm going to check in with some of our Times team around the globe. David Charter, first of all, in Washington, D.C., Assistant US Editor of the Times. Hi to you, David.
Good afternoon, John, from Washington, D.C.
Right, how are things going down? Welcome, David. How are things going down there in D.C.? We know that one of Andy Burnham's first calls was to President Trump. He invited the president to Manchester for the G20 next year. How are things being seen?
Yeah, there's a lot of intrigue over here. They're trying to work out the new Prime Minister. I guess that's not a novel reaction to him, but that's certainly the reaction over here is what does he really mean? Because they've heard that he is left-wing and that obviously over here socialism is a dirty word with the Trump administration. And we got an indication of that when Trump's first response when he was asked about Andy Burnham last week was that, well, he was, I guess, the mayor of a town. I hear he's extremely liberal, extremely. So that means he probably won't open up the North Sea, only for Andy Burnham later, of course, to say that he did want within the existing licenses for there to be a lot more North Sea oil drilling. And so we got this Trump post on Sunday, yesterday, that the people of Aberdeen are dancing in the streets because of the new Prime Minister, Andy Burnham, saying that he will be opening up all the way the invaluable North Sea oil. So we know that Trump's been banging on about this at every opportunity when he talks about Britain, as well as how much he loves the royal family and his recent criticisms of Keir Starmer. He's had a bee in his bonnet about North Sea oil, and I do think this will help Burnham get off on the right foot with Trump on the phone. But to be honest, reading between the lines of today's phone call, if the invitation is for Trump to come over for the G20 next year, that's at least 6 months away, could be a lot longer away. Seems to me that Andy Burnham wants to keep him at arm's length.
Interesting. And well, very soon now, we've got to know what the Prime Minister has decided to do as far as British cooperation with the US military in the war in the Middle East, the US-Iran war.
Right. So this is perhaps an issue that's caused a lot of problems over here with the British Embassy and leaks and so forth about exactly how the Brits will liaise and which bases will be supplied. And so if Ed Miliband, for example, emerges as Foreign Secretary, say, we know from we think we know from purported leaks that he was very strongly resisting allowing America even to use its own bases in Britain for raids on Iran. So that could be a stumbling block if that filters through to Trump, that the new Foreign Secretary was opposed to US overflights for bombing raids, which of course Keir Starmer managed to resolve after a few days and tried to smooth it out. But that was really when his relationship went south with Trump, because of that row, because of we believe the cabinet opposition to it was led by Ed Miliband.
And if a new Prime Minister means new objections to that kind of cooperation, that is, you'd think it's on the way to a very serious rift indeed. David Charter in Washington, D.C., thank you. Now, let's talk about the Middle East. Samir Al-Atrush is here with me in the studio, Times Middle East Correspondent. Samir, good to talk to you.
Hello.
Thank you. How big are the events here concerning the handover of the premiership? How big are they on the radar of Israel and the Gulf states?
Well, I think for the Gulf states, you saw congratulations coming from the president of the UAE today and the prime minister of the UAE, who's the ruler of Dubai. Now, I think we can say that they would have preferred not to issue these congratulations because they would have preferred for a prime minister to stay in place for more than a year or two or three. Their complaint has been over the past few years that it's very, very hard to develop relationships with British politicians, be they, the prime minister, the foreign secretary. Their way of working really comes down to personal relationships. That's why they get along swimmingly with Donald Trump and with Putin, on the other hand. But they've had some difficulty establishing long-standing, deep relationships with British governments because of the constant change. And we were talking about autocracies at the end of the day, monarchies or semi-monarchies or emirates, and they just look at British politics and think it's a mess. It's chaotic, and it's very hard to do business with them. They did manage to push through an FTA earlier this year that Britain was fighting very hard for in the GCC. Now, Britain would like to develop a bilateral trade agreement with the UAE, but this is the sort of thing that makes them think, well, hold on a second, we don't know who's going to be in power in a year. Once you develop a relationship with someone, he disappears. I heard that about Cleverly, the former foreign secretary. The Saudis had begun to really get along with him and see eye to eye on things, and then he was changed. So I think that's going to it'll certainly promote more skepticism in the Gulf when it comes to looking at investments in the UK, major investments or visits. The president of the United Arab Emirates was planning to visit the UK before the Iran war broke out, and I'm not sure whether he's going to do it. You have Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who's been on the agenda for now almost 3 years, a visit to the UK, and he put it off under Sunak. He thought it was for various reasons, but so this is the sort of thing that sets back these relationships, and they are important for the UK because they're looking to attract investment, certainly. So the Gulf is a very big market for them.
All right, Samir Al-Atrush, thanks so much for joining me. Good to have you in the studio, Samir. Now, shall we talk about Europe and neighbours over the water? Oliver Moody is the Times Berlin correspondent. He's on the line now. Hello, Oliver.
Good afternoon, John.
Hi. So tell me how closely focused on all of this that we're talking about at length and obsessively. How closely are they watching it in Brussels?
Well, I've just been trawling through the major continental European news websites, and the ascension to power of Andy Burnham has been eclipsed in news value by the death of Kevin Keegan from a continental perspective.
Yeah.
It really is not a top 10 news story for most of the biggest outlets.
Yeah, interesting to hear that. I mean, maybe not entirely surprising, although the German leader, Friedrich Merz, has invited Burnham to Berlin, but maybe that's under the heading of expected courtesies.
We've had a lot of cordial boilerplate from Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, from Merz, from Giorgia Meloni, the Italian Prime Minister, as one would expect. But fundamentally, the European leaders want three things from the UK. They want political stability. They want a clear sense of what the UK would like to do with its relationship with the European Union. And they want the UK to fulfil its defence spending promises. Yes. And on all three of those counts, the jury is still out with respect to Andy Burnham.
Yes, although the European leaders, the more communitaire European leaders, they will be aware of Burnham's background, the sort of rhetoric in favour of closer union, and even in the past, talking about it in the distant future, yes, but rejoining the European Union. And meanwhile, we have the talks on a new trading relationship having been paused during this handover between Starmer and Burnham. Will they be hoping for, I don't know, maybe they just wanted to do away with the uncertainty of the transition, but will they be hoping for something more to their liking in the outcome now we've got Burnham in number 10?
What I hear time and time again from European officials from a whole range of countries is that this is not fundamentally for them about the UK rejoining the European Union or the single market or the customs union or joining the Schengen zone. What they want is a stable partner that they can establish a long-term strategic relationship with that will be predictable, that they can count on. They would like a foreign secretary that stays in post for more than a year. They would like a prime minister that stays in post for more than 2 years. And the political volatility that they see every time they look on at the UK is weighing extremely heavily on these calculations when they think about what kind of concessions they would be prepared to make in the interest of a closer relationship.
All right, Oliver Moody, Berlin correspondent for The Times. Thank you, Oliver. Now, should we talk to Maxim Tucker, the Times Ukraine correspondent? Now, hi to you, Maxim. Maxim we spoke to a little bit earlier on, and he shared his view about what people in Ukraine are going to be making of the change of leadership.
I think Ukrainians have already become quite accustomed to our prime ministerial turnover, and they will be expecting Britain to continue its steadfast support for Ukraine. Perhaps there is a little bit of nervousness that Andy Burnham is considered to be a more domestic-focused prime minister than Keir Starmer, but I think it was a reassuring message for Ukrainians that Keir Starmer, one of his very last acts, was to come to Kiev, talk to President Zelensky and reassure him that British support will continue. And that is very, very important for Ukraine. I lost count of the number of times that Ukrainian soldiers have expressed gratitude to us. As a British journalist, they talk to me about their gratitude to Britain in providing intelligence support, in providing advocacy for weapons, and they will need and want that to continue. Ukraine has turned from a country that desperately needed Western weapons into one of the most advanced manufacturers of weapons in the world today. And what they need from Britain and other allies is now more funding for the defence sector that enables them to keep up production even under very, very difficult circumstances. And what they also desperately need is, of course, air defences. This is something that's still difficult for Ukraine to manufacture, and particularly air defences against ballistic missiles.
Maxim Tucker there, the Times Ukraine correspondent. Ollie Cole here with me in the studio. Where have we got to? I've just seen that a veteran Hillary ban has been shown the door.
Yes, well, to bring it back to Downing Street, which is where all our attention is at the moment, with appointments still incoming, the leaving continues. So Hillary Benn out as Northern Ireland Secretary, and something to take to the pub this week, John, that this means that Andy Burnham will be the only Labour Prime Minister this country has ever had without a member of the Benn family around the cabinet table.
Well, there's a thing. Yeah, well, you're right. That's just a thing to bring up over a pint this evening.
If you want your friends to leave.
No, just the opposite, Ollie. More coming up. Thanks so much, Ollie Cole.